We take a closer look at today's hearing with Victoria Nurse of Georgetown University. She served as chief counsel to Vice President Joe Biden in 2015 and 2016, and as counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee when he was its chairman. And Sai Krishna Prakash, he's a constitutional law scholar at the University of Virginia and a former clerk to Justice Clarence Thomas. He will be testifying before the Judiciary Committee on Thursday as a witness in favor of Judge Barrett's confirmation. Hello to both of you. So, Victoria Nurse, to you first. What do you make of the questioning from these senators, or I guess in some cases statements, and the answers she's giving? Overall, what do you make of it?
Well, I think it was fairly predictable that some senators would take this occasion to talk about their own constitutional philosophy. Some of these senators are in very tight races as well. So there's a bit of campaigning going behind the scenes. I think, she is being very cautious, as she should, about not undermining her independence. But it's pretty predictable, given prior hearings, that we wouldn't really understand her view on particularly controversial legal issues as opposed to personal issues.
And Professor Prakash, predictable to you as well?
Yeah, I agree with what Professor Nurse just said. Nominees tend not to answer specific questions about cases, particularly when they can say the case might come before them. The only time she really engaged with the questions was when she had decided a case or issued an opinion, and then she felt freer to discuss it, in part because she had already said something about it. But beyond that, she, invoked the Ginsburg rule or the Kagan rule.
Let me stay with you, Sai Prakash, and just ask you, what would you, if you were pulling the strings, what would you like to have heard the senators ask? What kinds of things that the Democrats and the Republicans aren't doing?
I think they're asking the right questions for the folks who they care about. That is to say, I think the Democrats are asking questions about the outcomes of cases in part because their interest groups are most focused not on process but on outcomes. Whereas the Republicans like to emphasize that they don't want judges who legislate from the bench, which I think speaks to the concerns of their constituent groups. Now, there's one person who is quite interested in outcomes and not process, and that's the president. But that actually sort of aligns them well with the Democrats because they, too, at times seem more interested in outcomes and not in judicial decision-making or reasoning.
Victoria Nurse, are you hearing, pick up on that. Do you think the senators have more leeway in the kinds of questions that it would be more productive if they pursued other avenues?
No, I think you have to understand about this particular hearing, even though it's predictable from her point of view, it's very unusual. So we are in the midst of an election. People have already voted. We're in COVID. The senators are, Amy Klobuchar she seemed quite upset, actually. She was very effective in her questioning, and I thought she really drilled down into questions about a particular dissent from Judge Barrett. But, I wish they would focus a little bit more. We shouldn't have this dichotomy between the Dems on the outcomes and the Republicans on the process, because it's both. And once she's on the Supreme Court, even if she comes to her decision by a process that, Republicans have blessed, there are effects. It's different if you're an appellate judge or a trial court judge. She will be one of 9 unelected people, and she'll be deciding on statutes as well as the Constitution. She's an expert in statutory interpretation. And that means she could agree with Trump that, this ACA case, the statute doesn't make any sense anymore. It says that the individual mandate was essential, and therefore I'm going to throw the whole thing out. That's the Trump administration argument. So I think people need to see both to understand what's going on, because the method's really a code for the results in some ways. I wish the Democrats would push more on that, but I understand why they're not, because it's a very unusual situation, and they want to communicate to people what some Notre Dame professors just did in a letter, which is, this is an unusual hearing. Let's talk about these issues. Let's talk about voting rights. Let's talk about gun rights. Let's not push this through while we're voting.
And Sai Prakash, is there something different Judge Barrett could be doing in the way she tackles these questions? We know she's trying to be very careful not to hurt her chances in any way, not to box herself in if she is confirmed to the court. But is there something different she could be doing?
Just as I wouldn't give advice to the senators about their job, I wouldn't give advice to the judge. I think she's doing a terrific job given the constraints that she and other judges feel in answering these questions. I think she's willing to speak about broad methodology, but not about particular outcomes and not about the status of particular doctrines. And I think that makes sense given that she may soon be at a higher level. Either way, she's a judge. Even if she doesn't get the promotion, she will be a judge and doesn't want to be perceived as having prejudged the case.
And Professor Nurse, is there, I mean, for the people watching these hearings who don't know the law, what's the best outcome here? I mean, that we learn more about her, that we hear more about these issues. What's the point?
I think, I am a traditionalist about civics. I think, people want this in some ways to be, law professors want it to be very legal and academic, but I think it's actually good to bring human beings into the courtroom. I think I'm one of very few law professors who've ever worked in Congress, only 2%. And I think we used to have members of the Supreme Court who actually had worked in the Senate. That never happens. And they go through these hearings and they're often like, what are you talking to me about those results there? I can't say anything about those results. But I think it's important for the American people to see that the Supreme Court has enormous power, and that power does affect their lives. That's why some people are so concerned we're doing this before the election. I've noted that some of her colleagues at Notre Dame now have issued, these aren't at the law school, but they've issued a letter to her saying she should withdraw her nomination and wait until after the election because it's so unusual. So it is a civics lesson. That's why they will be talking about results, because the senators are constitutionally required to represent issues to the people. So that's a legitimate function of the hearing.
Well, we are going to leave it there. We have tomorrow to go. We should say Justice Stephen Breyer did work in the Senate, serve on the Senate staff of the Judiciary Committee for, I guess, a short time. And we will leave it there. Victoria Nurse and Sai Prakash, thank you both.